Welcome to week 7 of Montessori philosophy. This week we'll be focusing in our discussion, our reading and our writing on a concept called normalization and how it relates to the ideas of discipline, order, and obedience. These are important terms in Montessori philosophy. The word normalization, when applied to children and to children's classes in general, may seem a little bit quaint or maybe even inappropriate to most people. But after you've read through this, you're going to realize, that it could hardly be more clearly and humanely stated than Montessori does in her writings. Normalization generally means that the child, through his development, becomes the child that he was predisposed to be before he began to interact extensively with the society in which he grows up. So many things occur in a society that get in the way of what Montessori would call expected or normalized development. If we as teachers and parents are able to facilitate the environment for the child in a healthy enough way that there's nothing to confuse the child, that child will grow up the way they were predisposed to. And the same thing is true about a class. You get any group of children in a classroom, a certain number of them are going to have a more difficult time adjusting to ground rules and expectations than others. A normalized classroom would be one that later in the school year has gotten to the point where most of the children are following the ground rules, being constructive in their behaviors most of the time. Obviously, it would be impossible to have a totally normalized classroom. But normalization is really a positive term rather than the negative thing that it seems to be. One of the most common fundamental misunderstandings that people have about a Montessori classroom when they first hear about Montessori and the description of it is that maybe they'd be interested in a classroom that has a little more structure. They're not really talking about structure. What most people call structure, they're really referring to what they call discipline, and what they mean by that is really teacher control. In Montessori philosophy, we expect the children to internalize their own self-discipline. We help to facilitate that. And one of the ways we do that is by allowing them to make decisions as they're working and growing, and allowing them to make mistakes that they can learn from themselves, as opposed to being able to follow directions throughout lifetime and then suddenly growing up to be an adult who has to make decisions on their own. It was critical to Montessori that we foster that development of internalized self-discipline. That is really what structure is, internal structure for the individual and for a class of kids in general. This week's readings will contain a great deal of discussion concerning the development of healthy and constructive work habits and values in the growing child. Those are some of the most important distinctions between traditional education and Montessori education. Before you start your readings this week, I'd like you to think a little bit about what your general perceptions or thoughts about what discipline is as you've been growing up and what you consider to be discipline as you are going through school, and how that might differ from what Montessori tried to foster. This week's readings may seem a little more lengthy than previous weeks, but you'll find that a lot of the readings of the chapters are repetitions of ones that you've already read, and you can kind of work through them, skim through them if you understand most of it. So your questions for your written assignment is, I'd like you to explain what Montessori means by the normalization of the child and the normalization of the classroom. And does this concept seem reasonable to you? And how would you distinguish between the usual understanding of discipline and Maria Montessori's understanding of the development of internal self-discipline and the ideas of order and obedience in children? Thank you.